Hi everyone. I think most of you have come across the information from the official handle on Twitter of CSIR that the tentative dates for the exam of the June 2020 NET exam has been shifted to the second week of November. It's still not clear when the exam will be held, and there are high chances that it might so happen, depending on the situation, that it is pushed further, or it may happen that both the December and the June exams are conducted at the same time. So for a lot of people who are having queries, what happened to the exam in June, you have at least like 3-4 months more for the exam to happen actually. So it's not happening before that, it may be later than that. So it's a high time, it's actually needed that you don't lose the focus. It's possible that you lose focus because of the delay in the exam, because of the conditions, but it's you can always try your best to stay focused on your target, because that's the only way. Okay, so sometime back, some of the students or some of the viewers on my channel requested to start something on the physical spectroscopy and organic spectroscopy. So I thought of coming up with a lecture series for ESR spectroscopy. That's I'll be doing in this particular lecture, and in this series I'll have mostly 2 to 3 videos, and in this particular video I'll be discussing mostly the concept of ESR, why it happens, how you can, what are the type of molecules which are ESR active, which are ESR inactive, some of the questions that have come earlier from this section, and then also discuss how you can find the multiplicity of the signal that you get. Okay, so let's start with what is ESR. Now ESR, or electron spin resonance spectroscopy, or is also known as the EPR, or electron paramagnetic resonance spectroscopy. So as the name suggests, electron spin, so that means here we are concerned with the spin of the electron. Now electrons constitute the molecular fragment of the molecule. So in a molecule, at what conditions the electron can have a spin? The electrons can have a spin when they are unpaired. For paired substances, for paired molecules which have paired electrons, if you have electrons like this which are paired, then the spin becomes 0. But for unpaired electrons, spin is not equals to 0. Now that is also clear from the word paramagnetic, that the species, the molecule, has to have at least one unpaired electron to be ESR active, and that is the only and the basic criteria for a molecule to be ESR active. So criteria is at least one unpaired electron should be present in the molecule. Okay, now if that is the condition, let us take a look at some very basic examples to figure out whether they are ESR active or ESR inactive. So active, and here we have inactive. Okay, so the first is, let's say we want to check for hydrogen atom. Now in a hydrogen atom, suppose this is your nucleus and you have one electron. Now that electron is unpaired. Since there is only one electron, so hydrogen atom is ESR active. Now let's take the case of hydrogen molecule. Now in case of hydrogen molecule, what happens is that there is bonding occurring between two hydrogen 1s orbitals, and you get sigma, sigma star, and the electrons are both in the sigma bonding but are paired. So if they are paired, they cannot be ESR active, so hydrogen molecule is ESR inactive. But what if I can protonate it to form a cation radical of hydrogen molecule? So now there is one electron remaining, other electron is lost. So you get H2 plus dot, which is, since there is an unpaired electron, this will be ESR active. Let's say you have the example of CH3 radical. Now 3 of the electrons on carbon are paired, but one electron is unpaired, so this again will be ESR active. Let's say you have O2. Now in case of oxygen, the bonding orbitals, or the molecular orbitals of the 2p Why 2p? Because the configuration is 1s2, 2s2, 2p4. So 1s2, 2s2, both the electrons from both the oxygen atoms are already paired. We are interested in 2p4. So in 2p4, you would get something like this. Right? So in this case, what you would expect? In pi star, there are 2 electrons unpaired, and that is why O2 is also ESR active. Okay, so what can be another example for inactive molecules? Let's say you have CH4 or you have NO plus. Now in case of NO, we know that this is the case of NO radical. And if you remove this unpaired electron, this becomes NO plus. So NO plus, since it has paired electrons, will be inactive, but NO radical will be ESR active. Now if you are considering inorganic complexes, so if you have, in most of, we have seen in the case of coordination complexes that, let's consider CFT, crystal field theory. So for complexes like D8, D9, they will have at least 1 or 2 unpaired electrons. So they are ESR active. But if you have D6 low spin or D10 kind of configurations, so they are ESR inactive. Let's say for D6 one, you have cobalt H2O whole 6 3 plus. Now we know cobalt 3 plus in aqua complexes forms low spin complexes. This has D6 configuration, so that will be all paired electrons, so it will be ESR inactive. And for, let's say, D9, we are taking the case of copper aqua complex in +2 state. This has D9 configuration. So just by finding if there is an unpaired electron in a molecule, you can figure out whether it is ESR active or ESR inactive. Now there have been some questions which ask you for ESR activity of NO plus, BO2 plus, copper 2 plus, if I'm not wrong, I2 and I2 minus. So there was a question, I think possibly in some one of the exams in the last 1 or 2 years, I don't remember which one. So they asked, I think mostly possibly in GATE. So they asked this question. Now you can see NO plus is inactive. This is not radical. NO plus is inactive. Copper 2 plus is active. I2. Now halogens have P5 configuration. So in that case, you would expect that 10 electrons filled, all the electrons are paired, so this is inactive. If there is an extra electron, it will go where? That will be active. Where does it this? And now you have VO2 plus. Now in VO2 plus, vanadium is in +4 state. So vanadium +4 state will give you D1. It has 1 unpaired electron, so that means it will be ESR active. Okay, so now we can decide which molecule will be ESR active, which molecule will be ESR inactive. Let's take a look at why some molecules are ESR active, why ESR spectroscopy is advantageous over NMR spectroscopy in some of the cases, and then we'll move on to the multiplicity that we can find for the signals in ESR spectroscopy. Okay, now let's take a look at why some molecules are ESR active, what is happening in the molecule, and then we'll get an idea of why splitting is occurring. So what happens in ESR spectroscopy is that you have a sample which is placed between 2 magnets, that means they are under a magnetic field, and you apply some microwaves. What happens is that some amount of microwave is absorbed and the remaining is detected by the detector, and it tells you the intensity of the microwave that is absorbed by the molecule, and you get the plot of the sample. Now, why is it that some amount of microwave is absorbed? Now, whenever you listen that some amount of energy is being absorbed, or some amount of microwave or any other radiation is absorbed, the most probable or the most frequent thing that is going to happen is there is some kind of transition occurring. Now, in ESR spectroscopy, we are dealing with the electrons spin. So, that means there should be some transition happening by the electrons. And what is that? So, the spin magnetic moment of an electron is plus minus half, which in the absence of any external magnetic field remains at the same energy level. There is no difference between the two. But when you apply some magnetic field, very strong magnetic field, this gets splitted into minus half and plus half. Because the spin magnetic moment interacts with the magnetic field applied from outside. Now the electron which is present here is now present in the lower energy level, and it can do transition to the higher energy level by absorbing energy equivalent to h nu. Now this is clockwise upspin, and the higher energy level is anti-clockwise downspin. And this is the same thing which happens even in case of NMR spectroscopy. That when you apply magnetic field, the energy levels of the protons or the spin energy levels of the proton get split into two. We apply microwave, they do the transition. So the same thing as in NMR. The only difference is that there is a proton, here is a electron. But if you look at the signal of ESR spectroscopy, you get a signal something like this. But when you look at the signal of NMR, you get a sharp peak. And why is that happening? So this is I versus G. I is the intensity, G is the G value, or also known as G factor. Now, we are not going to look at the details of G factor, what is its physical relevance, because that's not important from the examination point of view. G value is actually the position of the signal that you get in the ESR plot, and it can be determined by finding the remaining quantities in this formula, where h nu is the amount of energy that is absorbed to do the transition that you can get from the instrument, B naught is the amount of magnetic field, and mu naught is the Bohr magneton. So if you find these three quantities, you can get G value and you get the signal. Now, why is it that in NMR you get a sharp peak, but in ESR you get a broad peak? So a broad peak, this is the case of singlet. This is the case of a doublet. This is the case of a triplet. Now, why is it that the signals are so different from NMR if the same thing is happening? Now, that is because of Heisenberg uncertainty principle. Let's say which is less than equals to h by 2 pi. For this convenience, I am taking as equals to. So you get h, which is a constant, delta mu delta t equals to h by 2 pi. So you get delta mu is equals to 1 by 2 pi delta t, or let's say delta mu is inversely proportional to delta t. Now delta t is also known as the relaxation time. And what do you mean by relaxation time? Now relaxation time is the amount of time that is taken by the excited electron or proton to come down from the higher energy level to the lower energy level. Now higher the relaxation time, lower will be the delta mu and the peak will be sharp. Lower is the delta mu, lower is the relaxation time, delta mu is large, peak will be broad. So that means relaxation time large for proton, relaxation time less for electron. So that is why when delta t is large, delta mu is small, peak of an NMR spectra is sharp, and the vice versa happens in case of ESR spectroscopy. Now when you have very broad peaks, now since there is only one peak or two peak or three peaks, it is easier to find the position of the signals or to decide what is the multiplicity. But when the number of peaks increases, it becomes very difficult to find what is the spin multiplicity or what is the position of the peak. So in order to tackle that, what we do is we take the first derivatives of the signals. First derivative of intensity with respect to intensity. And this remains the same. And the singlet will now look something like this. So you have a maxima, you have a peak which has a maxima, and the maxima, the value of the first derivative will be 0, which is, let's say, here. And this is the value of g that you get. A doublet will look something like this, and a triplet will look something like this. Okay. Now, in case of an NMR, the peaks look something like this for a doublet. For a triplet, it looks something like this. So this has 1:1 ratio, this has 1:2:1 ratio, area ratio of the peaks. And the same thing is followed here, 1:1, 1:2:1. And why is that the area ratio is same? Because this splitting, either in case of ESR or in case of NMR, is occurring because of interaction with a nuclei which has spin equals to half. So whenever splitting is occurring because of interaction with nuclei having spin equal to half, they are going to follow Pascal's triangle. I am sure you know how to find the signal P area ratios, peak area ratios using Pascal's triangle. Okay. So, and this is gonna, okay, so in NMR spectra, you get peaks, you get signals for each of the different hydrogens which are present in the molecule if you are doing a proton NMR. But in case of ESR, no matter what the molecule is, no matter what the complex is, you will always get only one signal for the unpaired electron that is present. And that is why in some of the cases, ESR spectroscopy is much more advantageous over NMR spectroscopy, which has large number of signals, and it becomes difficult to assign those peaks to all the different fragments of the molecule. So that is why ESR at some places is advantageous. Okay. Okay. So we are done with what is happening, what we do, how do we get the peaks, why they are large. Now let's take a look at why splitting occurs. Now, what is happening is that, let's take the example of hydrogen atom. In hydrogen atom, you have an electron revolving around a positively charged nucleus. Now, the positively charged nucleus, because of its charge, will have a magnetic field which we will term as local magnetic field. Okay. Now, this local magnetic field is much weaker than the strong magnetic field that we are applying. So, in the normal case, when we apply some magnetic field, this gets splitted into two energy levels. This is minus half, this is plus half. And further, because of the weak local magnetic field, these energy levels will also split a little to two different energy levels. This is Mi. That is because of the interaction of the nuclei with the electrons, with the electron. Interaction of the magnetic field of the nuclei with the electron. So these get splitted into, okay. So how do you provide, how do you label these energy levels? There is a trick to this, and the trick is that it will always start with the highest plus value and it will always end with the highest plus value. That means it will start with the same positive value and it will end with the same positive value. Okay. Now the electron which is present here, because of the external magnetic field, came here. Now it came here. Now in a single electron, when there is only one electron, that means there is no nucleus, only one electron. In that case, this kind of an energy level is generated and there is only one transition occurring because of absorption of radiation. So you will get this peak. There is only one peak. But now see, there are more number of possibilities for transition to occur. So if there are more possibilities, more amount of energy or different type of amount of energies will be absorbed. So you get different peaks. But not all transitions are allowed. So you have some selection rules. Okay. Now the selection rules say delta ms has to be equals to 1 and delta mi has to be equal to 0. Now delta ms will become 1 for any transition occurring from this energy level to this energy level. That means you are not allowed transitions between this to this and this to this, because they are in the same they are between the same spin magnetic moment states. Okay, now let's take a look at what transitions will give you delta mi 0. So transition from this energy level, that means plus half of the lower energy level to the plus half of the higher energy level, and minus half of lower energy level to minus half of the higher energy level. So that means you are getting two different transitions possible, and that is why you would expect to get a doublet in this case. And indeed you get a doublet, which is area ratio of 1:1. Let's take another very easy example, which is the case of H2 plus radical. Now in this case, hydrogen, another hydrogen, and there is one electron. Now both of these electrons are in the influence of two different two nuclei of two hydrogen atoms. That means it is under the local magnetic field of two nuclei. So now in this case, what will happen? So you have this energy level gets split into two. Now each of these energy levels will further split into different energy levels. Okay. So now this was minus half, this is plus half. Now what is going to happen is that these, okay, so how do you label these energy levels? For these three energy levels, you would get plus 1, 0, minus 1, minus 1, 0, plus 1. Okay, fine. Now, so what are the transitions that are possible following these rules? So the transition has to happen from these three to these three. It's just that delta mi has to be 0. So first is 0 to 0, plus 1 to plus 1, minus 1 to minus 1. Now there are three transitions, so you are supposed to get a triplet. But it's obviously not necessary to always do this kind of splitting, but there is a very easy formula which is also applicable in case of NMR spectroscopy, and the formula is 2Ni plus 1, where N is the number of similar nuclei, I is the spin of the nuclei. So if this is true, let's take the case of the electron. So in case of electron, there was no nuclei, so that is why this part became 0 and you got 1. For proton, you would get 2 into 1 into half plus 1, that will give you 2. For a H2 plus radical, you would get 2 into 2 into half plus 1, you get 3, so you get a triplet. Let's apply this to another system. Let's say you have CH3 radical. For CH3 radical, now the unpaired electron is present on the carbon. The concentrated nuclei of the carbon family is C12, which has spin 0. So that means it will not get affected by the nuclei of the carbon, but the three hydrogens which are attached, because the concentrated nuclei of hydrogen family is hydrogen 1, which has I equals to half. So that means now we'll apply the same formula 2Ni. So I get 2 into 3 into half plus 1. So I get 4. So that means I am supposed to get a quartet, and since the splitting is because of spin half, it will follow Pascal's triangle, and I will get area ratio 1:3:3:1. Okay, so what happens in case of NMR spectra is that you get peaks like this, and there is, for a splitting, there is a gap between the peaks which is denoted by J, which is known as coupling constant. But in case of ESR spectroscopy, the same splitting difference is denoted by A and is known as hyperfine splitting constant. And why is it that? Those lines which are occurring because of the electron and interaction with, of the electron with the external magnetic field are known as fine lines. But those splitted lines which are occurring because of the interaction of the unpaired electron with the local nuclei are known as hyperfine lines. And these are those splitted lines, and that is why the difference between the two splitted lines are known as hyperfine splitting constant. We'll see why it is important. So there was one question in one of the exams to find the number of lines for CH3CH2 ethyl radical. So since carbon family has concentrated nuclei of carbon 12 which has nuclei spin 0, so the only ones which are going to affect this electron is the protons. Now let's consider the case of H2. These are directly bonded to the carbon having the unpaired electrons, so they will have larger effect than the other carbon's protons. So you will apply the formula, and if there are more different type of nuclei which can interact with this proton, you will just keep multiplying those also. So you have got 2 into N1 plus I1 plus 1. So in our case, N1 are those protons which are directly attached to the carbon having the unpaired electron. So which is 2. Number of protons is 2. Spin is half. Similarly for the other one, so you get here 3, 4, you would expect 12 lines to see. Now how do these 12 lines look like? So first you will get a triplet because of these two hydrogens, which will have a ratio of 1:2:1. Then they will get splitted into quartets. What will be the area ratio? The quartet, normally the quartet have area ratio 1:3:3:1. So we'll write 1:3:3:1, 1:3:3:1. Similarly 1:3:3:1. But since the area ratio of this signal itself is twice than these two, so these will change to 2:6:6:2, and these will remain the same. So this has been a question earlier. CH3 radical was also asked earlier in one of the exams. Very simple questions. We have seen the case of CH3 radical earlier. Now let's see why hyperfine splitting constant is important. Let's say I am taking the example of NH2 radical. Now in NH2 radical, the nitrogen can interact with the because of its spin 1 can interact with the unpaired electron. Nitrogen's nuclei can interact with the unpaired electron and also the protons. So you would get 2N1I1 plus 1, 2N2I2 plus 1. So in this case, my first atom is nitrogen, 1 atom, 1 spin plus 1. So you get a 3 here, and then you get 2 into half plus 1, a 3 here. So we are expected to get a 9 lines signal. But what you need to see is that so these are the 3 lines, and they are in the ratio 1:1:1. Okay. One other information is given is that a splitting constant because of nitrogen is 10 millitesla and splitting constant because of hydrogen is 5 millitesla. So what do you expect? You would expect there should be 9 lines. So this will have area ratio. This because these are because of the hydrogens having spin half. This is because of the nitrogens having spin 1. Now, when you say splitting constant 10 millitesla, that means this difference is given as 10 millitesla. Similarly, this difference is also given as 10 millitesla. But 5 millitesla means this is 5 millitesla. Similarly, this. So that means at this point, this is 5, this is 5. Both the signals overlap. Similarly, at this point, this is 5, both the signals overlap. As a result, you don't get to see two different lines but one line. So you would see 1:2:2, and the area ratios, the total, similarly here and this. So if you ask in presence of these conditions how many lines you will have, you have to actually calculate these after calculating the number of lines in usual conditions. Okay, now let's take the example of C6H6 radical. So again, there are 6 hydrogens, 2 into 6 into half plus 1, 7 lines. Let's say you have naphthalene and an unpaired electron with a positive charge on this. So you would expect, okay, so in this case, there is a symmetry, axis of symmetry through here, and you have 1, 1, 1, 1, same type of protons, 2, 2, 2, 2, same type of protons. So you have two different types of protons. So you will get 2 into 4 for the ones, into half plus 1, into 2 into 4 into half plus 1 for the protons marked 2. So these get cancelled. You would get 5 into 5, that is 25 lines. Let's take a bit complicated example. Say for example, you have a benzene having chlorine here, not say chlorine, O minus, and you have COO minus here. So now you have got 1, 2, 3, 4 different type of protons. And if this benzene ring has a radical form, what will be the type of signal that you will get? So you are supposed to get similarly 4 times. So each one of these will be 2, 2, 2, 2. So you will get 16 lines. Okay. So I think that is all that I wanted to discuss in this particular lecture. We have seen how you can find the number of lines for smaller and easier organic fragments, how to calculate the number of lines when you are given a splitting constant, why molecules are ESR active, which molecules will be ESR active, which will not be ESR active. So questions have come previously, 2 or 3 questions I have discussed in this video. In the next video, I will be discussing ESR spectroscopy applied to inorganic complexes, and then we'll move on to the questions that have come in NET and GATE from ESR spectroscopy.